the zero capital business secret Grandma and I shared over grits. As a kid, I lived for trips to Grandma's house. Her cooking wasn't just nourishment or food, it was a symphony of flavors that danced on my palate. It was a spiritual experience. Her biscuits were like fluffy clouds on a plate kissed by sunshine. Her pies were poetry in crust form, and her cakes? They could have won awards and got standing ovations. Scratch that. They should have. Everything she made was magical. And the secret behind her culinary magic was an enchanted, mysterious pastry bakery cabinet where her baked goods rested overnight, suspended in a flavor that somehow made them even better by morning. That cabinet was less a piece of furniture and more a portal to a gastronomic world of wonder and magic that defied logic. Now, I'll admit, I was a little too enthusiastic about her cooking. No matter how much I ate at home, I'd show up at her door claiming starvation. One fateful day, Grandma, with a mischievous glint in her eye, decided to call my bluff and teach me a lesson. She handed me a massive pot of grits and a spoon that looked more like a shovel. "Here you go, boy," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "This is all for you. Better eat every bite or you'll get a spanking." I carried that mountain of grits to the back porch, sweating like a preacher on Sunday. I thought to myself, the jig is up. She knows I'm faking it. But then, inspiration struck. I noticed a hole in the porch floor, about the size of a baseball. Perfect. One spoonful at a time, I shoveled grits into that hole, praying my plan would work. Just as I got to about 2 last spoonfuls, Grandma appeared. Let's just say I got a good old-fashioned life lesson that day. Moral of the story? Never try to outsmart Grandma. She's playing chess while you're eating grits. But don't let that fool you. We were tight. I was one of her favorite grandchildren, though she kept that secret better than the Colonel's chicken recipe. Around the other 34 grandchildren, she treated me like the black sheep. She would greet me sometimes saying, "Here comes the devil." Spoiler. But I knew I was one of her golden lambs. As soon as I got to her house, she'd sometimes send me out to get a switch as I walked through her door. And of course, I would pick the flimsiest, deadest, dried-up switch I could find. She was always prepared. Then she'd reach behind her chair and pull out 3 or 4 green switches that were platted up together and say, "This is for you," even excluding my other 4 siblings at that time, but I always felt it was never personal, just business. Years later, I realized Grandma wasn't just a great cook. She was a business genius. She turned her passion for cooking into the best catering business in town, all without a dime of startup capital. Watching her work was like watching magic happen in real time. She'd be humming over her pots and oven. Her secret recipe, being a musician, I could hear the out-of-pitch notes. I'd be wanting to say, "Shut up, Grandma, you're out of tune." But I knew better. And this food somehow would not only taste amazing, but also could stretch to feed an army. It was like a loaves and fishes miracle for feeding multitudes. Grandma didn't just cook for profit, she fed the whole neighborhood. Town drunks, widows, orphans, anyone in need was welcome at her table. At first I was mad about it. "Grandma, they're taking advantage of you," I'd mutter under my breath. But Grandma would just display a serene-like smile or chuckle. Here's the kicker. Later it was revealed to me they weren't taking advantage of her at all. People always found a way to repay her kindness. The neighborhood drunk would bring her cash after cashing their checks. Some would go out collecting cans and bottles and drop off money. Even people who had nothing would barter by doing chores or working for the meals. Some would go fishing and hunting. They would come back and pay what they could, when they could. Grandma didn't just cook food, she cooked up trust. She became to me a business genius and, most of all, the great humanitarian. Eventually, her reputation spread. Restaurants begged her to make dishes for their menus. Weddings, funerals, special events, you name it, Grandma was catering it. Uptown, downtown, everyone knew her name. Her business thrived, and she never had to borrow a single dollar. Before she passed, Grandma shared her secret. "Son, when you thought they were taking advantage of me, I was being blessed. People didn't just pay for their plates, they paid for others' plates too. You also saw I didn't charge them. I know I could have got $5 per plate, but when they returned, they would bring $200 or more. They believed in what I was doing, the cause. They also did all the word-of-mouth marketing for me. Remember, you don't always need money to start. You just need what's in your hands and your heart." And before she passed, I went to her bedside in the hospital. She lit up, sat up and said, "There goes my biscuit boy," and wanted me to help her out of bed, sneak out of the hospital to go and prepare me some biscuits. But out of concern, I had to pass on that because of the frailty of this Shiro powerhouse of a woman. And that's how Grandma taught me that the real magic wasn't in her cabinet. It was in her generosity, grit, and ability to turn what she loved into something extraordinary. Moral of the story: success doesn't require money, just a little grit or grits, a lot of heart, and the courage to trust in people and yourself. This story is about my grandmother, Virginia B. Phillips, by Kenneth Ferguson.